morning. This is Pastor Allen. It's Tuesday morning, and we are on day 3 of overcoming anxiety. Well, what is the source of anxiety? Is it something that comes from deep within us? Is it something that comes from our mind? Or does it originate with God? Well, the first thing to understand is anxiety does not come from God. He did not create it. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7 tells us this. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but one of power, love, and sound judgment. So, if God didn't create anxiety, where does it come from? Well, we know there's many things in life that can cause anxiety. I mean, there are just some stressful things in life that are going to cause us anxiety. We see it on the news every night currently with the COVID-19 virus. Awaiting tests from your doctor, losing your job and source of income, worrying about getting all the groceries that you need, your spouse filing for divorce, being quarantined in your house with no toilet paper, just to name a few. They're all reasonable reasons for feeling anxious. Now, second, there are times when anxiety begins with wrong thinking in our minds, when we don't fully trust in God and His Word, and when we don't take every thought captive to the obedience of God's Word. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5 says, and every proud thing that is raised up, in other words, Paul's talking about taking captive every proud thing that's raised up against the knowledge of God, and we take every thought captive to obey Christ. Now, third, there are times when anxiety comes from something that we don't even recognize. Yes, some people, some people get this feeling of dread or this feeling of anxiety or this just a feeling that they can't quite put their finger on. We've all been anxious about something and we can't quite put our finger on what we're anxious about. And, sometimes God is trying to get our attention. God is trying to speak to us. God has something that He wants to let us know about. But we can't figure it out right away. So we just get this feeling that we can't put our finger on. And, the harder we try to figure out the reason why we're anxious, the harder or the worse our anxiety becomes. And so we become anxious and sometimes we'll cry out to God. Sometimes we'll tell other people, are you trying to tell me something? Or what are you trying to show me? And that's a good thing to ask if you're not sure. God, what are you trying to tell me? Are you trying to show me something here? See, none of us wants to miss God's will for us in our lives. And it's easy for us to get off track and to lose focus. But if we wait on the Lord, it's easy to get back on track and put our focus on God and give Him the anxious thoughts in our mind. Now, we mustn't let anxiety live in our lives, live in our minds. And this means that no matter where the anxiety comes from, we need to deal with it right away. Now, having anxiety in itself is not a sin. It's an emotion. It's a human emotion. But we should not be hanging on to it either. It should not be something that we keep thinking about. It should not have a negative effect on us. We must be willing to deal with our anxious thoughts and feelings. Otherwise, they're going to take over our lives. Anxiety is simply a response to some circumstance in your life. And when God is trying to reveal a truth to you regarding a situation or situations, then resolving it needs to be our number one priority. When God sees something going on in your life and my life that needs instruction or correction, we need to give him our full attention. Otherwise, the alternative is living a life filled with anxiety, filled with doubt. And you know who wins in that case? Satan. There are many, many things that cause anxiety. Really, anything can cause it. And while the emotion in and of itself is not a sin, not dealing with it in the right way, not dealing with it becomes a sin. So tomorrow we're going to look at some important reasons that we should deal with our anxiety as soon as it rises up in our lives, as soon as we feel it, and how we should do our best to avoid anxiety altogether. Now let's look over those Bible verses again, and I hope that you will meditate on them today and this week. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. For God has not given us a spirit of fear. And it also says this in John chapter 7, verse 13, John chapter 14, verse 27, and Romans chapter 8, verse 15. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but one of power, love, and of sound judgment. And then 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5. And every proud thing, take captive every proud thing that is raised up against the knowledge of God. And we, us, me and you, we take every thought captive to obey Christ. That's our first promise, first step from the Word of God on how to overcome anxiety. Take every thought captive to obey Christ. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.